My damn wife told her friends I was just to see how relationships work, so I left her, and now she's begging me to come back. Hey everyone, my name is Derek, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to my wife Victoria, who's 26, for about 4 years now. For the longest time, I genuinely believed that things were pretty solid between us. Sure, we had our occasional disagreements and rough patches like every couple does, but nothing that ever seemed major or relationship threatening. At least that's what I thought until recently. Let me give you some background on Victoria so you can understand the full picture. She used to work in marketing at a mid-sized company located in downtown Miami. She was actually pretty good at her job and made decent money, so she had her own independent thing going on. This was important to me because I've always believed that both partners should contribute to a relationship in their own ways. However, about a year and a half after we got married, Victoria started complaining more and more about her work situation. She would come home every day talking about how stressful her job was becoming, how demanding her boss was, and how she felt like she was stuck in a rut. She kept bringing up this idea of wanting to focus on other opportunities and explore different career paths. She talked about maybe starting her own business or getting into social media influencing, though she never seemed to have any concrete plans. I work as a marketing coordinator myself and make pretty good money, enough to support both of us comfortably. So when she kept expressing how unhappy she was at work, I told her that if she wanted to quit her job and take some time to figure out what she really wanted to do with her life, she should go for it. I thought I was being the supportive husband, you know? I figured that's what partners do for each other. They provide support during transitions and help each other pursue their dreams. Looking back now, I realize how wrong I was about everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So last Tuesday night, Victoria decided she wanted to have her girlfriends over for dinner. This wasn't unusual at all. She does this maybe once every few weeks, and I've always been completely fine with it. Usually, it's the same group: Natasha, Crystal, and sometimes this other girl whose name I can never seem to remember, no matter how many times I've met her. These dinner gatherings follow a pretty predictable pattern. The girls get together, eat way too much food, and spend hours talking about whatever it is women talk about when guys aren't around. I actually don't mind these dinners at all, because Victoria always seems genuinely happy when her friends come over. There's this lightness about her that I don't see as often anymore, and it reminds me of why I fell for her in the first place. Plus, I actually enjoy cooking anyway, so these dinners give me a perfect excuse to make my famous lasagna. And by famous, I mean I use store-bought sauce and just add extra herbs and cheese to make it taste better. It's not exactly gourmet cooking, but it tastes good and everyone always compliments it, so whatever works, right? The girls showed up right around 7 p.m. that evening. I spent about an hour and a half in the kitchen getting everything ready: the lasagna, garlic bread, a salad, and some wine Victoria had picked out earlier. The whole time I was cooking, I could hear them in the dining room getting progressively louder and more animated as they caught up on each other's lives. When I finally brought everything out to the dining room, they were deep in conversation about some drama involving one of Natasha's other friends. It was something about this girl dating her friend's ex-boyfriend, or maybe it was the other way around. Honestly, I wasn't really paying close attention because that kind of high school level drama doesn't particularly interest me. I set all the food down on the table, asked if they needed anything else like more wine or napkins, and then went back to the kitchen to start cleaning up. This has always been my routine during these dinners. Victoria has told me multiple times that her friends really appreciate that I don't hover around trying to insert myself into their conversations. They get to have their girl time without some guy constantly interrupting or trying to make everything about himself. So there I was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher and wiping down the counters, when I realized their conversation had shifted from talking about other people's relationship drama to discussing their own relationships. Nothing unusual there either. That's probably about 80% of what they discussed during these get-togethers. But then I heard my name mentioned. I kind of tuned in without really meaning to, the way you do when you hear someone talking about you. That's when I heard it, clear as day. Victoria saying, "Honestly, girls, Derek's just my practice husband until I find someone better." I literally stopped moving, like completely froze with a dirty plate in my hand. For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard her or taken something completely out of context. Maybe she was talking about someone else, or maybe I'd only caught the tail end of a different conversation entirely. But then one of her friends asked, "What do you mean a practice husband?" And that's when Victoria started explaining to her friends in detail what she meant by that comment. She told them that I'm good for now because I pay all her bills and do all the cooking, but she's not planning to stay with me forever. She said I'm fine for practice, but not actual husband material for the long term. The problem, she explained, is that she can't really leave me yet because I pay for literally everything in her life. All three of them started cracking up like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Meanwhile, I'm standing there in my own kitchen, holding dirty dishes, wondering if I'm actually hearing what I think I'm hearing. The sound of their laughter felt like it was echoing off the walls, and I realized they were laughing at me, at my expense, while I was cleaning up after a dinner I just cooked for them. The worst part wasn't even what she said, though. It was how casually she said it, like it was just an obvious, accepted fact that everyone already knew about. She wasn't confessing some deep secret or asking her friends for advice about a difficult situation. She was just stating the current state of affairs, like she might comment on the weather or mention what she had for lunch. I set the plate down real carefully, trying not to make any noise that might alert them to the fact that I was listening. I just stood there for probably 2 full minutes, trying to process what I had just heard. My wife of 4 years, the woman I've been supporting financially for the past 2.5 years, the person I cook dinner for every single night, whose friends I've been entertaining in my own house. She had just told those friends that I'm practice. Practice, like I'm some kind of training wheels that she's using until she's ready for the real thing. I thought about walking right into that dining room and confronting her immediately. I thought about asking her to explain exactly what the hell she meant by calling me a practice husband. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the shock of what I just heard. Maybe it was the sudden realization that if I made a scene right then and there, her friends would never tell me what they really thought about anything ever again. But honestly, I wasn't really thinking clearly at all. I was just standing there feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. How long had she been thinking this way about our marriage? How long had her friends known about her real feelings? Was I literally the only person who thought our marriage was actually real and meaningful? These questions kept spinning around in my head while I listened to them continue their conversation as if nothing had happened. After they left, I waited about an hour before bringing anything up. I figured I'd give Victoria time to clean up and get settled before I confronted her about what I'd heard. I didn't want to seem like I'd been sitting upstairs plotting or anything, though honestly, that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to figure out how to approach this conversation without completely losing my mind. When I finally went downstairs, she was loading the last few glasses into the dishwasher. She looked relaxed and happy, like she always does after hanging out with her friends. There was this content smile on her face, and she was humming some song under her breath. It was such a normal domestic scene that for a moment I almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't imagined it, so I asked her straight up what that comment about me being practice was all about. She acted like she didn't know what I was talking about at first. She just gave me this completely blank look, like I was speaking a foreign language or asking her about something that had never happened. So I spelled it out for her. I told her that I had heard what she said about me being her practice husband and how she can't leave because I pay for everything. I explained that I'd been in the kitchen when she made those comments to her friends. That's when her whole demeanor changed completely. The confused act dropped instantly, and she got this look on her face like I was being ridiculous for even bringing it up. Her expression shifted from fake confusion to annoyed irritation, like I was the one being unreasonable here. "Oh, that? Yeah, I said that. Do you have a problem with it?" she asked, just like that. No apology, no explanation, no attempt to soften what she'd said or claim it was taken out of context. She just asked if I had a problem with her calling me practice, like I was being overly sensitive for not wanting to be described that way. I looked at her for maybe 10 seconds, really looked at her. She was standing there in our kitchen, looking genuinely annoyed that I had the nerve to question her for calling me a practice husband. There was no shame, no embarrassment, no recognition that what she'd said might be hurtful or inappropriate. She was actually acting like I was the one being unreasonable for bringing it up. I told her no problem at all, and that's when I started planning my response. That weekend was probably the longest 48 hours of my life. Victoria was acting completely normal, like absolutely nothing had happened between us. She was making breakfast on Wednesday morning, asking if I wanted to go furniture shopping over the weekend and talking about maybe planning a vacation for this summer. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there drinking my coffee and thinking about how she had basically admitted to using me as nothing more than a financial safety net. We even went to her parents' house for dinner on Thursday, like we do most weeks. We sat around their dining room table while her mom asked about my work, and her dad told the same stories he tells every single week. Victoria was playing the role of the perfect daughter and loving wife the entire time. She was holding my hand under the table, laughing at my jokes and acting like we were this amazing, happy couple. The whole time I'm sitting there thinking about what her parents would say if they knew their daughter was essentially planning to trade up from me when someone better came along. Would they still be so friendly and welcoming? Would her mom still ask me about my work projects and tell me how proud she is of what I've accomplished? Would her dad still treat me like the son he never had? Friday morning, I called out sick from work. I told my supervisor I was coming down with something and needed a day to rest up. It was the first time I'd used a sick day in probably 2 years, but I had much more important things to deal with than whatever was happening at the office. I drove straight to my lawyer's office downtown. Yeah, I have a lawyer. When you own property and have decent assets, you get yourself legal representation. I learned that lesson from my dad, who got absolutely cleaned out in his divorce back when I was in college. I wasn't about to make the same mistake he did. I explained the situation to my lawyer without going into too much dramatic detail. I simply told him that my wife had made some comments that strongly suggested she was planning to leave me eventually, and I wanted to know exactly where I stood legally. He pulled out my file and started going through all the paperwork from when Victoria and I got married. It turns out that prenup I had insisted on was the smartest thing I'd ever done in my life. Victoria wasn't happy about it at the time. She kept saying it showed that I didn't trust her, and how truly romantic couples don't need legal protection from each other. But I had watched my dad lose half his retirement savings and the house he'd worked 25 years to pay off. I wasn't about to make that same mistake. The prenup was pretty straightforward and ironclad. Anything I owned before the marriage stays mine. Anything I earned during the marriage stays mine, unless she can prove she contributed to it financially. Since she quit her job and hasn't worked in 2.5 years, that would be pretty hard for her to do. The house is in my name only. The savings accounts are in my name only. Even the car she drives every day is registered solely in my name. My lawyer explained that technically, since my name is the primary name on all our accounts, I could move money around as long as I wasn't doing anything that would look vindictive or punitive in court. The key was to be smart and methodical about it, not emotional or reckless. We spent about an hour going through absolutely everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, insurance policies, even stupid stuff like streaming service subscriptions and gym memberships. It's amazing how much financial stuff gets completely tangled up when you're married. Most people don't realize how complicated it actually is to separate two lives that have been combined for years. The crazy part was realizing just how much control I actually had over our entire financial situation. Every single credit card was in my name with her listed as an authorized user. Every utility bill, every subscription service, every automatic payment, all of it was tied to accounts that I controlled completely. She had been living off my money for so long that she didn't have any independent financial foundation anymore. That afternoon, I started making subtle changes. Nothing dramatic that would tip her off to what I was planning, just small adjustments that would give me more control when the time came to act. I moved a significant amount of money from our joint checking account to my personal savings account. Not all of it, but enough to matter. I changed passwords on several key accounts and updated contact information so that notifications would come to my email address instead of hers. The rest of the week, I kept acting completely normal while quietly preparing for what was coming. Victoria didn't notice anything different because she never paid attention to our finances anyway. She just used her cards and assumed money would always be there whenever she needed it. She never asked about account balances or monthly budgets, and certainly never wondered where the money was actually coming from. The following day, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. It took about an hour to go through all the details and make sure everything was worded correctly according to the terms of our prenup. On Monday, I signed everything. It felt weird putting my signature on papers that would officially end my marriage, but it also felt like I was finally taking control of my life instead of just letting things happen to me. 2 days later, I put the final pieces of my plan into place. I made sure all the important accounts were properly secured and all the legal paperwork was ready to go. Everything had to be timed perfectly for maximum impact while staying completely within legal bounds. You see, Victoria has this routine every Sunday. She meets Natasha and the rest of her friends for brunch at this expensive place downtown. It's become like a weekly tradition for them over the past year or so. They sit around for hours eating overpriced eggs, Benedict, and avocado toast, taking pictures of their food for social media, and then usually go shopping afterward at the kind of stores where a single shirt costs more than most people's grocery budget. This Sunday was going to be different. Sunday morning started exactly like every other Sunday for the past year and a half. She came downstairs around 11 a.m. looking like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot. She grabbed her keys off the kitchen counter and gave me this quick, casual kiss goodbye. The kind of kiss you give someone out of habit rather than affection. I told her to have fun with the girls, and I watched her drive away in the car that I make the payments on, wearing clothes that I bought for her, carrying credit cards that I'm financially responsible for the last time. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I made the call to cancel her remaining credit cards. It took about 15 minutes to go through all the account verification procedures and get everything shut down. The customer service representatives were very professional about it. After all, the cards were in my name, so I had every right to cancel them. Next, I called the bank and had them freeze our joint checking account. I told them I suspected unauthorized access and needed to protect the funds while we investigated the situation. Again, this was technically true. Her access was definitely unauthorized as far as I was concerned now. The whole process took maybe 30 minutes total. 30 minutes to completely cut off the financial pipeline that had been supporting her lifestyle for the past 2.5 years. I spent the rest of the morning setting up boxes in the living room and organizing all the divorce paperwork into neat piles. I made an organized little collection of everything she would need to know about finding her own place, getting her own insurance, and figuring out her own finances. You know, all the adult responsibilities she'd been avoiding while I handled everything for her. Around 2 p.m., my phone started buzzing with text messages. The first one was from Victoria asking me to call the bank because her card had gotten declined. I ignored it completely. At 2:15 p.m., another text came through saying her card still wasn't working and she was embarrassed in front of the girls. I ignored that one too. By 2:45 p.m., she was sending me messages in all capital letters, demanding that I answer my phone immediately. The desperation was already starting to show through, and she'd only been dealing with this situation for maybe an hour. It was fascinating to watch how quickly things escalated when her safety net disappeared. Then she started calling me repeatedly. I let every single call go straight to voicemail. She called 6 more times in the next 20 minutes, and each voicemail message got progressively more frantic and angry. You could hear the panic building in her voice as she realized something was seriously wrong. The funniest part was when I got a text message from Natasha saying that my wife was losing it at brunch because her cards weren't working. She actually used the laughing emoji in her text. This was the same girl who had been cracking up about me being a practice husband just a week ago, and now she was watching Victoria's perfect little world fall apart in real time. I texted back asking if everything was okay, playing it like I had no idea what was happening. Natasha responded saying that Victoria was claiming there was some kind of problem with the bank and she couldn't pay for anything. I replied, "Really? Banking problems? How weird," and left it at that. Then Victoria's phone calls stopped abruptly. I figured she had either borrowed money from one of her friends to cover the bill, or she had decided to come home and confront me directly about what was happening. Based on how well I know her personality, I was betting on option 2. I was absolutely right. Half an hour later, I heard her car pull into the driveway much earlier than expected. I could hear her car door slam from inside the house, not the normal gentle close she usually did, but the angry slam of someone who had just endured a very bad afternoon. The front door opened about 10 seconds later, and she came storming in looking like she was ready to burn the entire house down. She was yelling before she even saw me, going off about how her cards had gotten declined in front of everyone and how Natasha had to pay for her lunch. She was ranting about how embarrassing the whole situation was, how she'd had to make excuses to her friends about why she couldn't go shopping with them afterward, how the bank must have made some kind of terrible mistake, and why the hell didn't I answer my phone when she desperately needed my help? I was sitting calmly on the couch with the divorce papers in my lap and boxes stacked up next to me, just sitting there as composed as could be while she went off about her terrible afternoon. When she finally stopped yelling long enough to take a breath, I told her in the most calm, matter-of-fact tone I could manage, "Yeah, I canceled the cards because you don't need them anymore." That's when she really lost it. She started demanding to know why I would do such a thing. What was wrong with me? And how could I possibly embarrass her like that in front of her friends? She was acting like somehow I was the bad guy for not wanting to continue funding her lifestyle after she'd made it clear she was just using me as a temporary financial solution. But then she noticed the papers and boxes sitting next to me on the couch. Her whole attitude shifted from furious anger to confused panic really quickly. She asked what all this stuff was, and I handed her the divorce papers while explaining that this was her graduation from practice marriage. The look on her face when she realized what was actually happening was probably worth every single penny I'd spent on her over the past 4 years. It was pure shock, followed immediately by panic, followed by this desperate attempt to backtrack and pretend like none of this was really her fault. She tried every possible approach she could think of to get out of this situation. First, she claimed that everything she'd said was just a joke, and I was completely overreacting to what was obviously meant to be harmless girl talk. Then she got apologetic and promised she didn't mean anything by what she'd said to her friends. Then she got angry again and tried to make it my fault for not understanding her sense of humor and for taking everything so seriously. But the damage was already done. I had heard exactly what she thought about our marriage and about me as a person. She had showed me exactly how much respect she had for the life I'd been providing for her. And now she was finding out what life looks like when that support gets completely pulled away. The whole time she was going through her emotional roller coaster, I just sat there watching her realize that her comfortable little setup was falling apart. The man she'd been calling practice had just practiced his way right out of her life. And the best part was that her friends had gotten to watch the whole thing start. They got to see her cards get declined and watch her scramble to make excuses. And these were the same friends who had been laughing about her having a practice husband just a week earlier. Now they were witnessing what happens when practice time officially ends. I gave her the same deadline I would give any tenant who wasn't paying their rent. 2 hours to pack up her belongings and get out of my house. After that, her stuff would be sitting on the curb, and she'd be dealing with this entire situation from somewhere else that wasn't my property. That's when she tried to pull the legal card on me. She started insisting that she couldn't just be kicked out like this because it was her house too. She lived here, she had established residency, she had rights, and I couldn't just throw her out on the street like some kind of deadbeat. She was trying to sound authoritative and knowledgeable about tenant law, but her voice was shaking the entire time. I pulled out my phone and showed her the prenup she had signed 4 years ago. I told her to read Section 4, Paragraph 2 very carefully. The part that clearly stated the house remained my separate property regardless of how long we were married or what kind of life we built together here. Watching her read through that prenup was probably the most satisfying moment of this entire experience. You could literally see her face change as she realized exactly how screwed she was. She had signed away any legal claim to the house, the cars, the savings accounts, and pretty much everything else of value. And she had done it willingly because she thought she was just humoring my paranoia about protecting my assets. She tried to argue that she didn't understand what she was signing back then, that I had somehow pressured her into it or misled her about what it actually meant. But we both knew that wasn't true at all. My lawyer had explained every single clause in detail. She had her own lawyer review the entire document, and she had signed it because she was so confident in her ability to keep me wrapped around her finger forever. When the legal reality finally hit her, she started crying. These were real tears, not the fake ones she used when she wanted something from me. She said she didn't have anywhere to go, that all her friends lived with roommates or in tiny apartments, and how was she supposed to find a place to live with no job and no savings account? I told her she should have thought about all of that before she decided to call me practice. The clock was ticking, and she had less than 2 hours to figure out her next move. What happened next was actually pretty impressive from a pure logistics standpoint. Once she realized I wasn't backing down and this was really happening, she went into full crisis mode. She started frantically calling friends to see who could help her move or let her crash at their place for a few days. She went upstairs and started throwing clothes into suitcases like her life depended on getting everything packed as quickly as possible. The funny part was listening to her phone calls with her friends. She couldn't exactly tell people the real reason she was getting divorced so suddenly, so she had to make up some vague story about us having irreconcilable differences that had come to a head. A few of her friends offered to help her out, but you could tell they were all confused about why this was happening so suddenly and why she seemed so desperate. Then she came downstairs with 2 large suitcases and a bunch of random boxes filled with her personal belongings. She was looking around the house like she was seeing it for the first time, taking in this place she had been living in for 4 years and treating like her personal hotel. It was finally sinking in that this house was never going to be hers, and she was never going to have any claim to the life we had built here. She tried one last desperate attempt to change my mind. She stood there in the living room with all her stuff packed around her, telling me how this was completely crazy, and we were throwing away 4 years of marriage over something stupid she had said to her friends. She talked about how people make mistakes, but they work through them together as a team, and how that's what real marriage is supposed to be about. I told her it wasn't stupid. It was honest. She had finally told the truth about how she saw me in our marriage, and I was just acting on that information. There was no point in pretending anymore that this was something it had never been. The thing that really seemed to get to her was how calm I remained through this entire process. She kept expecting me to get angry or emotional, or to give her some kind of opening to turn this into a big dramatic fight where she could play the victim. But I just stayed matter-of-fact about everything. This was business now, not personal. Then her ride showed up. It was Natasha driving some fancy SUV that probably cost more than most people make in a year. She looked uncomfortable as hell when she got out of the car, probably wondering what exactly she had gotten herself into by agreeing to help with this situation. This was the same girl who had been laughing about the practice husband comment just a week ago, and now she was witnessing the direct aftermath of that conversation. Right before she got in the car, Victoria tried one more time to salvage the situation. She asked me to please reconsider, to give her another chance to prove that she really did love me and wanted to make this marriage work. She promised she would never say anything like that again, and we could go to counseling, and she would do whatever it took to earn back my trust. I told her to take care of herself and close the door. I watched through the window as they loaded the last of her belongings into Natasha's SUV and drove away. I watched that same car disappear around the corner where this whole situation had started exactly 1 week ago. For the first time in years, everything felt exactly like it should be. That night was probably the quietest my house had been in 4 years. There were no TV shows playing that I didn't want to watch, no constant chatter about her friend's drama, and no planning expensive dinners at restaurants where the food costs more than some people make in a day. Just me, my pizza, and the sound of absolutely nothing. I woke up Monday morning feeling like I had been carrying around a weight that I didn't even realize was there, and now it was completely gone. Around noon on Monday, my phone started ringing. It was Victoria's mom, and I should have seen this coming. I had been so focused on the logistics of everything that I hadn't really thought about having to deal with her entire family afterward. I answered the call because I figured I might as well get this conversation over with sooner rather than later. Her mom launched right into it without even saying hello, demanding to know what was wrong with me and why Victoria was at their house crying her eyes out. According to her, Victoria was claiming that I had kicked her out for absolutely no reason. The whole conversation was exactly what you'd expect from someone who had only heard one side of the story. According to Victoria's version of events, I had apparently lost my mind over some innocent comment she made to her friends and decided to end our marriage out of nowhere. She had conveniently left out the part about calling me practice and saying she couldn't leave because I pay for everything. I asked her mom if Victoria had mentioned what she actually said about me being practice. Her mom brushed it off completely, saying I was being overly dramatic about some comment she made to her friends. She called it just girl talk, nothing serious that should threaten a marriage. So I spelled it out for her in detail. I explained that it wasn't just some random comment. Her daughter had told her friends that I'm her practice husband, and she can't leave because I pay for everything. She said this in my own house while I was making dinner for all of them. Her mom went quiet for maybe 10 seconds, and then came back with this argument about how that's just girl talk, and I can't destroy a marriage over girl talk. Like somehow the fact that women say these things to each other makes it perfectly acceptable behavior. I told her, "Watch me." That really set her off. She started going on about how I was being cruel and vindictive, how Victoria had made a mistake but she loves me, and we should be able to work through this like adults. She talked about how marriages take effort and communication, and I was just giving up at the first sign of trouble. The thing that really annoyed me was how she kept talking about Victoria making a mistake. Like accidentally calling your husband practice in front of your friends is the same as forgetting to pick up milk at the grocery store. This wasn't a mistake. It was her honest opinion about our marriage that she never intended for me to hear. I explained that Victoria loves my bank account, not me. There's a pretty significant difference between the two things. Her mom didn't like that answer at all. She started threatening that if I didn't take Victoria back, they were going to make sure everyone knew what kind of man I really was. They would tell people how I had abandoned their daughter when she needed support, and how I had thrown away a good marriage over my own pride. That's when I had heard enough. I told her good luck with that strategy and hung up the phone. Then I blocked her number because I didn't need to hear any more lectures about what a terrible person I was for not wanting to be called practice. About an hour later, Victoria's dad started calling me. It was basically the same conversation, but with more yelling and less emotional manipulation. He was taking the aggressive approach, telling me I was a coward for kicking out his daughter instead of working through our problems like a man. I explained the entire situation to him too, but he wasn't interested in hearing any details. He just kept repeating that real men don't give up on their marriages, and I was being weak and selfish. Apparently, real men are supposed to be perfectly okay with being called practice as long as they're still technically married. I blocked his number too. Then, Victoria's sister started texting me long, dramatic messages about how disappointed she was in me and how I was breaking up the family over something completely petty. She went on about how Victoria was devastated and I was destroying her life because my ego couldn't handle one stupid comment. I blocked her number as well. By Monday evening, I had basically cut off contact with Victoria's entire family. It wasn't because I couldn't handle their criticism or because I was afraid of confrontation. It was because none of them seemed to think there was anything wrong with what she had said about me. They were all more upset about me leaving than they were about her treating our marriage like a temporary arrangement until something better came along. Tuesday morning, my own parents called. My mom started off by asking if I was doing okay because they had heard about me and Victoria separating. Word travels fast in families, especially when someone is telling their version of events to anyone who will listen. I explained the whole situation from the very beginning. My dad's response was exactly what I needed to hear. He said, "Good for you," and admitted that they had never really liked how Victoria treated me anyway. He said she always seemed like she thought she was better than everyone and acted like she was doing me some kind of favor by being married to me. My mom agreed completely. She told me they had been biting their tongues for 4 years because I seemed happy, but they could tell that girl was using me. She said they had seen it from day one, but didn't want to interfere in my marriage unless I asked for their opinion. Finally, some support from people who actually cared about me instead of just automatically taking Victoria's side. My dad asked if I needed anything or if I wanted them to come stay with me for a few days while I got used to being on my own again. I told them thanks, but I was actually doing fine. Better than fine, honestly. For the first time in years, I felt like I could just exist without having to worry about someone else's mood or agenda or expensive habits. The conversation with my parents made me realize something important. The people who really knew me and cared about me weren't surprised by any of this. They had been watching Victoria take advantage of me for years, but they had respected my choices enough not to say anything unless I asked them directly. Meanwhile, Victoria's family was acting like I was some kind of villain for not wanting to be treated like a temporary placeholder. Like I should be grateful for the privilege of funding someone's lifestyle, while they openly planned to trade up when something better came along. The difference in reactions told me everything I needed to know about whether I had made the right decision. My family was relieved that I had finally stood up for myself. Her family was angry that their meal ticket had dried up. The next day, I changed my relationship status on social media and updated my emergency contacts at work. These were small things, but they felt significant. Like I was officially reclaiming my life instead of just sharing it with someone who didn't really want to be there in the first place. By the end of the week, the dust had mostly settled. Victoria's family had stopped trying to contact me, probably because they realized I wasn't going to change my mind no matter how much they harassed me. My own family was checking in regularly, but giving me space to process everything on my own timeline. The house felt completely different. Not empty, just peaceful. Like I could finally relax without worrying about someone judging my choices or planning their exit strategy behind my back. I was starting to remember what it felt like to just be myself instead of trying to be whatever version of myself someone else wanted me to be. Then I got a text from Natasha that said, "Hey Derek, hope you're doing okay. Can we talk? I'm really confused about what happened with you and Victoria. Give me all the tea." The audacity was absolutely unreal. This was the same girl who had been laughing when Victoria called me practice at that dinner. She had been there for the exact conversation that started all of this. She knew exactly what happened because she had witnessed it firsthand. I deleted the message and blocked her number. 3 weeks went by without a single word from Victoria. No texts, no calls, no random drive-bys, and no attempts to get my attention through mutual friends. For a while, I thought maybe she had actually accepted that it was over and moved on with her life. I really should have known better. I was home on a Wednesday afternoon working on refinishing this old coffee table I had bought at an estate sale. It was a nice distraction that kept my hands busy while I adjusted to my new routine. When my doorbell rang, I figured it was probably a package delivery or maybe one of my neighbors asking to borrow something. I looked through the window and there was Victoria standing on my porch. But she wasn't alone. She had some guy with her. Tall, decent-looking, wearing one of those expensive button-down shirts that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a month. Designer jeans, fancy watch, the whole corporate pretty boy package. They were holding hands like they wanted to make absolutely sure I noticed. I opened the door, and Victoria immediately launched into this introduction. She wanted me to meet Bradley, her new boyfriend. She said they had been dating and she thought it was important that I meet him since we were still finalizing the divorce. The guy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. You could tell he was uncomfortable and probably had no idea why his new girlfriend was dragging him to her ex-husband's house. But Victoria was putting on this whole performance, acting like she was so happy and moved on, and everything was perfect in her new life. I looked at both of them for a second and asked if they had only come here to tell me that. It was a simple question, but it cut right through whatever game she was trying to play. Bradley immediately looked at Victoria like he was confused about what was actually happening here. She started getting flustered and said she wanted me to see that she was doing fine without me and had found someone who really appreciated her. I told them that was cool and asked if they needed anything else, or if I could get back to my Wednesday afternoon. Just completely matter-of-fact about the whole thing. That's when Bradley spoke up and asked Victoria what this was really about, because she had told him they were just stopping by to pick up something she had forgotten at the house. It turns out she had lied to get him to come with her. She had probably told him some story about needing moral support or protection, or whatever excuse she thought would work. You could see the exact moment he realized what was actually happening. His whole demeanor changed from uncomfortable to genuinely pissed off. He started asking if she had brought him here to make her ex-husband jealous, and whether she was serious right now. Victoria tried to backtrack and make excuses, but the damage was already done. This guy had figured out that he was being used as nothing more than a prop in whatever drama she was trying to create with me. He dropped her hand, took a step back, and told her he wasn't doing this. He said she could find her own way home and walked back to his car. Just left her standing there on my doorstep, looking completely stupid, while he drove away without a second thought. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes from start to finish. Her big plan to make me jealous had backfired completely, and now she was stranded at my house with no ride and no backup plan. "Are you happy now?" she said, like somehow this was my fault that her scheme had blown up in her face. Like I had forced her to lie to some guy and drag him over here for this pathetic display. I didn't say anything. I just stood there waiting to see what she would do next. That's when she did the most desperate thing I've ever seen. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Okay, fine. I'm single now. Let's just get back together. We can start over and pretend none of this ever happened." I actually laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. Here was this woman who had called me practice, put me through 4 years of being treated like a placeholder, brought another guy to my house to try and make me jealous, and now she wanted to get back together because her rebound had ditched her on my doorstep. The audacity was absolutely incredible. She really thought I had been sitting around waiting for her to come back, that I had just been killing time until she was ready to give our marriage another shot. Like I should be grateful that she was willing to settle for her practice husband again now that her upgrade plan had failed. I was still laughing when I closed the door in her face. She started yelling through the door about how I was making a mistake and how we belonged together and all this other desperate stuff. She kept pounding on the door and ringing the doorbell like a crazy person. I put on my headphones and went back to working on the coffee table. Eventually, she gave up and left. I watched through the window as she called someone for a ride, probably having to explain to whoever picked her up why she was stranded at her ex-husband's house with no way to get home. The whole thing was so pathetic, it was almost sad. That was 2 months ago now, and I haven't heard from her since. Though I did hear through a mutual friend that she's living back with her parents and working at some retail job. Apparently, the whole influencer lifestyle doesn't work as well when you don't have someone else paying for it. Meanwhile, I got promoted again last month, and I'm thinking about getting a dog. Maybe I'll take some cooking classes and learn to make something more impressive than store-bought sauce lasagna. I'm also considering traveling somewhere I actually want to go, instead of just wherever looks good on social media. It's funny how everything worked out in the end. She said I was practice until she found someone better. Turns out I was practicing too. Practice for being the kind of man who doesn't put up with being treated like a backup plan. She practiced being terrible at marriage, and I practiced ignoring red flags that should have been obvious. Now we're both practicing being single, except I'm way better at it than she is. Guess practice really does make perfect after all. Update. So I thought this story was over, but apparently it's not. A few people have been asking for updates, so here's what happened recently. Last week, I was at the grocery store just doing my normal shopping when I ran into Victoria's mom in the produce section. I saw her first and considered just avoiding that entire area of the store, but then I figured I'm an adult, and I shouldn't have to change my shopping routine because of family drama. She saw me and immediately came over with this fake smile like we were old friends. She started with some small talk about how I was doing and whether I was taking care of myself. Then she launched into this whole speech about how Victoria was doing much better now and had learned from her mistakes. According to her mom, Victoria has been going to therapy and really working on herself. She's apparently gained some perspective on what happened between us and realizes now that she handled things badly. Her mom wanted me to know that Victoria would really like the chance to apologize properly and maybe have a conversation about closure. I listened politely and then told her that I appreciated her reaching out, but I wasn't interested in any kind of contact with Victoria. I explained that I had moved on completely, and reopening old wounds wouldn't be healthy for either of us. Her mom got this disappointed look and said something about how holding grudges isn't good for anyone and how forgiveness is important for healing. I told her I wasn't holding a grudge. I just had no interest in reconnecting with someone who had made it clear they saw our marriage as a temporary arrangement. She tried one more time, saying that people change and everyone deserves a second chance. I told her Victoria already had her second chance when I confronted her about the practice husband comment, and she chose to double down instead of apologizing. The conversation ended there, and I finished my shopping. But it got me thinking about how some people just don't understand that forgiveness doesn't mean you have to let someone back into your life. I can forgive Victoria for what happened and still have zero interest in being part of her life going forward. Anyway, that's the latest chapter in this saga. Hopefully, it's the last one.